the woman, Congresswoman Plaskett, she was one of the people that interrogated Matt Taibbi. She called him a so-called journalist. She also went on to ask him who gave him access to those emails. And then she said that she was not asking for a source. I'm going to play that clip from Orf because he actually made a clip for that. And it's actually really, really funny. And then I'm going to get into the story that just came out about her recently and why I question why she was even allowed to be a part of that committee, given the information that has come out about her. You can't talk about integrity when you see what she did. But I want to play this clip for those of you who did not see. This is really funny. So Orf, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but Orf made this clip. He's done a lot of clips before. You've probably seen his clips on other like lefty independent media outlets. He's really good at this. But he made one for the subcommittee hearing about the Twitter files. In reference to Congresswoman Plaskett, you have to see this, and then we'll get into the story about her.
Who gave you access to these emails?
Are you trying to get journalists?
No, I'm not trying to get
sources?
No. Who gave you access to these emails? I'm not asking you your source. I'm asking you who gave you access to these emails. I never asked them for their sources. Who gave you access to these emails? You are not going to say I've asked for sources. Who gave you access to these emails? I did not ask for sources. Who gave you access to these emails? I did not ask you who those sources were. Who gave you access to these emails? For the record,
Wyoming is recognized.
Who gave you access to these emails?
Again, Congressman, with respect, you asked me who gave me.
I asked you who gave it to you.
The ranking member of the Committee on the Weaponization of Government is asking for your sources.
I'm not. I am asking who gave you access to these emails.
No, that's a question
because
of sources.
You earlier said
Congressman, you're asking me to. You're asking your journalist to reveal a source.
This is a false narrative. We're engaging in false narratives.
I just can't answer your question.
Gentlelady is not recognized. Gentlelady is not recognized.
You're not recognized.
He has not said that. What he has said is he's not going to reveal his source, and the fact that Democrats are pressuring him to do so is such a violation.
We're asking him about his conversation.
I do think it's worth pointing out that I have co-sponsored, I think some of my colleagues have co-sponsored the SHIELD Act in previous Congresses with Democrats to protect what we see them trying to do today. Protect journalists from having to reveal their sources to government. That used to be a shared position in the Congress. Unfortunately, as we're seeing now, it's not the position anymore.
Who gave you access to these emails? I never asked them for their sources. We are going to tell the truth.
All right, shout out to Orf for that video. I'm sorry, that was hilarious. But Congresswoman Plaskett is actually in the news for other reasons, and she was actually brought to people's attention because of that subcommittee hearing and the statements that she made. And people kind of dug into some information about her that I was not aware of, and people are starting to question if she was even, or if it was even, I don't want to say a good idea, if it was even right to have her be a part of that committee. And I'm going to show you why. Because it appears that Congresswoman Plaskett is unlikely to return contribution from accused child molester Jeffrey Epstein. Yes. So she actually had a connection to Jeffrey Epstein. I kid you not. Let's go on. This article apparently came out in 2019. I never saw it. I never heard about this until now. So there she is. So let's get into it. Wealthy political financier and accused child. I got to be careful what I say on here. Think about that now. Jeffrey Epstein contributed directly to Democratic Representative Stacey Plaskett's last two campaigns for Congress. So FYI, sometimes donors, they may contribute through a PAC. This was not through a PAC. This was direct contributions from Epstein. The U.S. Virgin Islands lawmaker has decided she will be keeping the cash, even after Epstein's arrest in New York, at least for now. Mike McQueary, a spokesperson for Plaskett's office, told CNBC she has no immediate plans to refund the donation. No immediate plans to refund the donation. Keep in mind, this was afterwards. And considering what Epstein was convicted of, she took money from him. The right thing to do would be to give the money back, get rid of the money. But she wasn't willing to do that. But she wants to jump onto this subcommittee hearing and have the nerve to talk to two journalists about their credibility and their work. And she took money from Jeffrey Epstein and refused to return it. Let's go on. I'm pretty sure she's not. He said and later confirmed in a follow-up phone call to verify her position that his boss is unlikely to return the contribution. He declined to comment further about the investigation and how Plaskett knew Epstein. Now, why would he decline to comment on that? Why wouldn't he comment on how she knew him? I want to remind you, this is not a Congress member that can vote. She's from New York. She represents the Virgin Islands. She's more like a delegate, so to speak, so she can't vote. Why was she taking money from Jeffrey Epstein? Let's go on. Since the Virgin Islands is considered a territory, its representative in the House of Representatives is a delegate with limited voting power. Plaskett is involved with committees and has certain responsibilities on the floor, but not if her vote is going to be decisive. Still, the decision by Plaskett is significant as it shows that at least one politician is remaining defiant with holding on to donations from Epstein, even after Epstein's arrest. So I want to make this very clear. Even after he was arrested, she refused to give up the donations. He's been accused of blah, blah, blah. Gotta be careful what I say on here. Epstein created a vast network of underage victims. Epstein on Monday pled not guilty to the charges and has been ordered to be held without bail. And then it goes on to talk about his relationship with the Virgin Islands. Epstein, who owns an entire private island in the Virgin Islands called Little St. James, contributed $2,700 to Plaskett, the most an individual donor can give directly to a candidate in both the primary and the general election. So he gave her the maximum amount. Again, to someone who can't vote. Do you see the problem here? Why was he willing to give her that much money? The maximum amount to someone who can't even vote. Maybe it's because he has that island in the Virgin Islands, and we're going to get into that story as well, because he was trafficking people there. Let's go on. During her 2018 run for re-election, according to the Federal Election Commission record, in 2016, he wrote two separate $2,700 checks for Plaskett, including one during her primary campaign when she eventually won. She finished the 2018 congressional midterms, raising just over $359,000. Plaskett appears to be one of the few candidates that received a donation from Epstein last cycle. One of the few. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee saw a $10,000 check from him in October, but immediately sent it back. So the DCCC saw that $10,000 check and sent that one back. Epstein historically has been a staunch financial supporter of Democrats. He's also been friends with President Donald Trump. Now, speaking of the banking system and speaking of the banks, I want to remind you the connection that Jeffrey Epstein had with the Virgin Islands and JP Morgan. I covered this a while back. Just want to go ahead and remind you of this if you haven't had a chance to see it, and then you can go watch the full clip. The name of this clip is JP Morgan Exposed and Sued. So listen to this clip pretty quick. The U.S. government, the government of the U.S. Virgin Islands alleges in a lawsuit filed this week that JP Morgan Chase turned a blind eye to evidence that disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein used the bank to facilitate sex trafficking activities on Little St. James, on Little St. James, the private island he owned in the territory until his 2019 suicide. Pause. Okay, so JP Morgan was complicit in this. So let's connect them. You had JP Morgan, you had the Virgin Islands, and you had Jeffrey Epstein. And then you have Jeffrey Epstein giving the maximum amount to a candidate who can't even vote, but she represents the Virgin Islands. You really should watch that entire clip, because the reason why that story was even reported is because the Attorney General of the Virgin Islands sued JP Morgan. She filed a lawsuit against them once she found out this information, that they were complicit with Epstein's activities on her island, on the Virgin Islands. She filed that lawsuit. I reported that story. Literally, like 2 days later, she was fired. Coincidence? I think not. But Miss Plaskett, who was so quick to call people so-called journalists and wag her little finger at them and ask them for their sources and say she wasn't asking for sources, she had a lot to say to journalists. Maybe she just had something against those kind of journalists because they were doing independent journalism, and maybe she was afraid they might know some things about her like this. So for me, I don't think she should be on a committee, especially if we're going to talk about integrity. Let's keep it real. Bryce says, I call it hush money, Sabby. You know, I don't have any evidence of that. I don't want to speculate, but it looks a little suspicious. Marxist Mark says, Sabby Sabs doing more detective work connecting the dots than the police, LOL. Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, you know, someone sent that my way and I said, interesting.